Moore,
Here.
O'Kane,
Here.
Shaner. Here. Gott.
Here.
Waters.
Here.
Well, we're here to interview Eric Swanson, and I don't think any of these council members have ever had this job to do. I've had it a couple times, so I would suggest we didn't go through this type of process.
No.
I would suggest we give Mr. Swanson a chance to give some opening remarks, and we'll go for some questions. How's that sound?
Sure, and I'll try to be respectful of time. I know we've got just so
Take
much
long
time.
as you want.
Okay, all right. Well,
No doubt. Take your time.
all right. Well, hey, I'm really humbled to be here today, speaking with you about my role as a city manager, if you so choose. And this has been, growing up here and going to school here, and then, becoming a member of the 185th at a young age, at 19, taught me the values of servant leadership and working in communities. The experience I got there as a 19-year-old airman, crash firefighter, was invaluable because it allowed me to be in a workspace, but also go into college. I'm also a graduate of University of South Dakota, where I met my bride, and we've been 38 years later. We're empty nesters at this point. But anyway, so a lot of really great things happened to me in Siouxland, if you consider Yankton, and growing up here, almost over half my life in this community, in this area, in this region, and I've always had, I'll be honest, I have always had this idea that someday I'd like to be the city manager of Sioux City. As I got in this career and, saw what was happening to my community and understanding, more and more as I got older in this business, the kind of things that happen. And, great things are happening here. I had a great tour this morning with Marty, who, pretty much put all the information out there. Didn't get a lot of chance to ask questions. He was, but that's okay. That's sometimes, that's why God gives us 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? You gotta listen to more than what we talk. And as I'm going around, that was definitely informative. And the kind of investments that this city's made in their future is to be congratulated. And you're doing good work here. And I'm proud to be a Sioux Cityan, and so that's kind of how I got here. I mean, as I mentioned before, I had starting my career in the military in the Guard at 19, doing my original enlistment of 6 years, and then always had, if I had an opportunity to be an officer, I wanted to take that chance or have that opportunity happen for me. So, I mean, it's kind of been parallel with my job, which has been a real blessing. It doesn't happen all the time, especially the way the Guard system works and promotions and stuff. But I was able to finally be promoted to colonel, full bird, and during that career, deployed to Iraq and understand what it is to be leadership under fire. Not that city manager necessarily are getting shot at every day or having, that kind of thing. But the stress is there sometimes, and responding to those in a calm way and with leadership skills that I learned from that. Yeah, I feel like I would be a good candidate for this position, especially with some of the challenges that you are facing. I've seen in the community with infrastructure, homeless, some of the other things that are challenging, to say the least, but have experience with. So thank you again, and appreciate hearing your questions.
We're just going to start with Matthew and ask questions as we go, if that's okay with you guys. So Matthew, you can lead it off.
Need to
Got a
start.
whole bunch of questions.
Yeah.
You can
All
ask
right.
whatever you want.
One's fairly straightforward, but please tell us why you're attracted to this position with the city of Sioux City.
Well, I think the best days for Sioux City are ahead, and I would love to be part of that. And I think I bring, the skills and the skill set that you're looking for, experience, some successes in economic development, community development, success, just infrastructure development, grant writing, being able to secure grants for a lot of the projects that the cities that I worked for were involved with. I always felt like that was something that I always look for opportunities to be able to leverage funding from state sources, federal sources. So I think with the kind of things that you would like to see happen here, and I say you collectively would like to see, and this community would like to see, I think I have that ability to bring some of those experiences to the position. Mm-hmm.
The city of Sioux City is considerably larger than your current community and any of the other cities in which you've served as the chief administrative officer in the past. Therefore, what challenges do you expect to encounter in managing a significantly larger municipal government, and what strategies will you employ to address those challenges?
Sure. Well, so a couple things I'll say. One is the community that I'm currently serving, as you may know, went through a significant disaster. A wildfire went through the community, took out about 25% of the city. And I felt I was asked to be the interim and then eventually the full-time city manager. And I've felt an obligation to help them work through that.
Remind me of that population.
It's about 5,000, yeah. So the challenges that I faced in that situation, would be the same regardless in terms of the population. It's teamwork, it's collaboration, it's finding ways to accomplish rebuilding a police, fire, city hall, and combining them into one structure efficiently with solar. I mean, those are all project-related things that happened during that time that was impacted by COVID and supply chains. So what I'm really getting at is I think that experience, most recent experience, would equal in larger communities because it involved teamwork and it involved working with the state on getting appropriations, working with the feds on getting appropriations, working with private sector, rebuilding a playground, infrastructure, those kinds of things, and doing it with really very minimal financial impact on the city. Now, I was City of Medford city manager for 3 years, with similar size to Sioux City. I would say, they're both just as equally as challenging, just different, different dynamics, different sizes, different responsibilities. But, again, after my career, Yankton was 20,000, 14,000, 20,000 trade area, Roseburg, 25,000, Medford, 85,000. So really the community that I'm at right now is really kind of the one that I felt like I really want to help these people get back on their feet. And, it's happened. We did some annexation. We've done annexation, 600 acres of annexation, urban growth boundary expansion. These are all things that cities of all sizes are trying to accomplish. And so we're able to get those kind of things happening. But it was all collaboration. It wasn't just me. Sometimes I led the charge. Sometimes I follow, good follower, good leader, those kind of things. But thanks for asking that question. I really wanted to clarify that because I think it's important for people to know that this is.
That one, but it's a good one.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
But thanks for asking the question. I said I'm not sure who submitted that one. We all submitted questions and they compiled them into a book, so we're not necessarily reading our own question.
We don't have to go in the order they're in either.
Sounds good.
Alex?
Yeah, no doubt. Keep track. Well, Eric, I appreciate the opportunity to get to know you a little more and to sit up here with a barrage of questions. I am sure it can be a little overwhelming, but I appreciate you making the time in the application for this. I think that's exciting, an exciting step. The question I wanted to pose was really focused, I think, in today's day and age, when you're thinking high-level positions, whether elected or otherwise, we focus on maybe the first few steps or the first 90 days, if you will. So I wondered if you were selected for this position, where would that focus be in those first 90 days on the job, and what specific objectives do you think you'd want to accomplish?
So I asked, we got to our final question, you know, with the city staff today, and they said, do you have any questions? And I said, yes. What do you see my first 90 days looking like? Successful 90-day.
So you preempted the question. There
Well,
go.
you know, not really, because I was asking them.
Yeah.
They weren't necessarily asking me, but they were telling me what they felt was important, which I think was good. It was great. I appreciate some of the feedback. But some of the things they talked about was just, you know, getting out into the community, meeting some of the key stakeholders in the community. You know, I just can't emphasize enough, and I don't know how many times I've said this today, but, you know, leadership doesn't happen behind closed doors. So I feel like I have an obligation to get out and learn the issues, have face-to-face conversations. And I would appreciate from this council anything that you can provide me in terms of who to go see, what organization, when's the Rotary meet, are you going to be able to give a speech, you know. All these transitions that I've made successfully in the past, and get to meet the employees and understand who's doing what, and just trying to get an idea of what are the issues from that perspective. And then again, you know, the big question always becomes, you know, where are we financially? You know, asking those kinds of questions and trying to get a gauge on what the finances look like, because obviously that's an important aspect, and I know there are issues that are impacting the ability of the city to you know, raise taxes, you know, they're coming from the state potentially, and those kind of things. So just understanding all of those dynamics would be important. Anyway, I can ask them if there was anything I missed there. But,
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, it's all about collaboration. It's all about learning, and just, you know, it's hitting the ground running, basically, is how I've been approaching this, both in my city and, you know, let's face it, the military, they give you lots of different opportunities to serve in different ways, and so there's a similar kind of transition with what goes with rank. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Hi, Eric.
Hi.
I too want to thank you for making the application for this important position that you're seeking. And I'm glad, I will just tell you up front, I'm glad that you are one of the finalists in this running. So the mayor and the city council, we have a major league decision to make. And just, these are my thoughts, just a strong leader who can communicate, listen, respect others, including the other elected officials, such as the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors and the Sioux City School Board members, and build on the very many successes we enjoy in this community. I'm going to skip to question 5 because I've kind of highlighted some of the questions I really wanted to make sure we were asking you. And that is, please share with us how you prefer that the members of the City Council interact with department directors and other senior staff. I can repeat that too if you.
No, I got the question.
Okay.
I'm trying to formulate a good answer here, because I think of all the things that the city manager is involved with, it's being the person that's the communication piece that you mentioned between council and staff. And so facilitating that in a positive way is, I think, one of the most important jobs that a city manager has, no matter where they're at in that capacity. And so some of the things that I've done in the past that's helped with that is, you know, just having, again, the open door policy. And if they're, you know, let's face it, you know, you guys are out there in the community, you get the questions, you know, you're the mayor, so I want to talk to the mayor. I mean, those are the kind of things that, you know, the input comes a lot of times from that direction. And so, you know, we need to be able to provide answers. And if that answer is something that's going to take some time to formulate a response, then we say, okay, well, we understand the question, let's get back to you and give you the full answer. And then once we go through that process, then we share it with the rest of the council so that they know that the communication is flowing in all directions, so that they know that this was something that was of concern and needed a response, and here was the response, so that we have everybody on the same level playing field when it comes to communication and answers and involvement with constituents. No, I mean, hopefully, some of those can get mitigated just in my being present in the community. And, you know, I did get a chance to talk to the city manager office staff here today, and they're very adept. I could tell that they're very passionate about what they do in terms of receiving those kinds of concerns and how to, like, formally, you know, get responses back, which is, you know, it's not always a yes, sometimes it's a no, but here's where it says. And for that to change, it has to be a policy decision, for instance, those kind of things. But I do want to say that I was really impressed with their level of understanding and how to really help facilitate that kind of communication.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I have had the opportunity to be in your area twice. I was in Medford to play football years ago with an indoor team, and
Oh, wow.
flew up there to move some grandparents back from Grants Pass, Oregon, and
Right.
stopped on the way in Wyoming because they had Coors beer and filled the truck up on the way home. Long time ago, I don't drink anymore. Anyway, it's a beautiful area out there where you're at.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sioux City is a very, government in particular is very union oriented. We have lots of labor groups that I think we've had excellent relationships with our unions the past few years. The state of Iowa, not so much, the approach they've taken on unions. What's your history? Is Oregon a unionized city when it comes to, is Medford or any of those?
Yeah, so it's not a right to work. It's a pretty, I would say, pretty supportive of collective bargaining issues and just union issues in general. So I would say on equal, if not more than Iowa.
And did you take an active part in those negotiations?
Oh, of course, yeah. It had to do with finances. I mean, I think we settled on the fact that you have 10 union collective bargaining groups. The most I've had was 7, so I understand how to have multiple negotiations going on and how to strategize and how to, you know, try to work within the fiscal constraints, but also, you know, trying to make sure that, you know, that the city is not just a training ground, that we offer salary and wages, that people want to come here and work and stay, so that we don't lose employees with, you know, turnover. And those are the kind of things that I would bring. But as far as direct involvement in negotiations, I'm the decision maker, so I allow the team to be involved in the direct and then separate from the decision-making process. Yeah.
Matthew?
Let's see. So describe for us your leadership style and explain how you empower and inspire department directors.
You know, I think a couple things mentioned the open door. I think the active listening part is important. An active listener when you're talking to a department head, either one-on-one or as a group. And I think just the conversation we had today really confirmed for me that they are really a collaborative group of folks, professionals, and they really see the value of working in concert and working together, communicating directly, and maybe
We silence our phones, guys. Thank you. Go ahead.
So again, going back to my comments, they're a very collaborative group, and then I think they want to see a city manager that wants to progress in that way. In other words, we all are a team. We're all working towards, you know, the same result, which is providing services to our citizens and being true public servants. And so that was encouraging to see, because that's, you know, that's where you want. That's what you want. And I would my approach would be to try to facilitate that, you know, one-on-one meetings, you know, whatever it takes, mentoring. Those are all things that I think are important. I talked to them a little bit about succession planning, you know, making sure that we got the next person ready for their position internally, you know, is always the goal, right? And so I think those are all things that that I would bring to that discussion. Mm-hmm.
Iowa, South Dakota, and Nebraska. We are the big tri-state area here, also known as Siouxland. With Sioux City being the largest population in the mix, how would you position us to lead and not just compete in our tri-state region over the next 10 years? Because they have some benefits that we do not have in our state. Personal property tax or personal income tax, things like that.
Sure.
How should we be viewed as the leader? How can we take that lead?
Well, yeah, I think it's the lead, and it's also just understanding, given the basic premise that when one ship goes up, all others, rise at the same time. In other words, we celebrate their successes, they celebrate ours. We understand that, that this is a region, and people, either they live in Sioux City, for instance, and maybe work somewhere else, or, vice versa. And so there's an overall impact. I mean, we have a large retail base, so obviously that's going to be something that would attract the smaller communities who want to be part of. But at the same time, it's really, we used to call it being regionable, that was the term we would use to try to describe how we want to work with others. And I can't talk specifically about Nebraska, although I know, is it Lance Hedquist? Is that the guy? Yeah, I've met him and know him from the past. But I can definitely give you like examples of working in Yankton and understanding, knowing people like John Thune and Tom Daschle when he was in office. I mean, it's a small state, but people get to know you, and so I bring that kind of experience and background to that discussion, because I think that's an important discussion to have and an important thing to actually buy into as a group. And I mentioned earlier the situation with urban growth boundary expansion and annexation. That was all done with a regional plan, done through a regional planning process. And one of the areas that we were able to get as a part of that was employment lands right off the I-5 corridor. So in other words, that was designated for property like campus type property for employment lands. And there's other examples that I've been involved with. Research Triangle Park, Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill had a similar setup there. And I saw how that can really work and benefit a region. And so I would bring that experience to the table.
To kind of piggyback off of that question, or maybe it's a little close in nature, but thinking in recent years, something that I know I've talked a lot about during budget times and other times throughout the year when we're governing, is that the state of Iowa, the Iowa legislature, has really eroded local control and the authority of cities in Iowa to be able to govern themselves and to kind of manage some of their different aspects of their community. In your current and or previous positions, have you encountered this type of intervention by a state legislature or challenges? And if so, what tactics did you pursue to address the issues created by those state lawmakers?
Well, I'd look at it from two approaches. One, just like, if this is something that's imminent, better plan for it, and better kind of not get in the moment and have to address it in that type of a situation. So, I mean, and I don't know enough to say that that's what would have to be done, but, I would quickly assess the situation, and if that's something that we got to do, we got to, we can't, to be sustainable, we got to be financially sustainable. We got to address that issue up front. But in terms of, how we can maybe formulate or help formulate policy or opinions about that, I think it's important just to tell the story, tell how this is, get into data-driven kinds of responses like this kind of a cut means this is what's going to change, and this is going to affect public safety, which all have to understand we support, and we need public safety. You know, those kind of approaches where you're actually giving them, you know, just an idea of how that's going to impact. Now, we have a League of Oregon Cities, which is our primary, you know, they're in Salem on our behalf and work on our behalf. And I guess my sense would be to get involved in whatever they're doing in terms of how they're addressing this issue. I think that's important that we, you know, all the cities in counties that are impacted by this, you know, are able to organize and say, you know, this is really important to us. And, you know, so that's the kind of approach I would take, just given the experience and, you know, and getting, you know, some of the leaders at the state level, you know, the information they need to make the right choice. Now, if we feel like they make the wrong choice, then that's their you know, prerogative. But and we have to move forward accordingly. And of course, I've been through, you know, South Dakota, Oregon. They've all passed measures that limit property tax, you know, property tax assessment and those kinds of things. So it's not something that's entirely unknown to me or unknown to the rest of the, you know, other states. But it's, I think, having an active process of having, you know, getting our own local leaders, you know, like local state folks to understand what the issues are.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Eric, I'm going to jump to 17 so everybody knows where I am. What is your experience with strategic planning, and do you believe that this type of planning is important for communities? And do you look at a 5-year plan, 10-year plan?
Yeah, you know,
or no
so
plan?
since in the 5.5 years I've been in the current position, this is the third strategic planning process that I've been involved in. And so I'm a huge believer in strategic planning and using that as a tool to prioritize, you know, what are important projects and service, you know, those kinds of things, and trying to measure those, and then eventually, you know, having a timeline for making the decisions or providing a response, or, you know, having some objectives that have to be met, basically. So the one I'm currently in is a citizen-driven strategic plan. So we're doing a lot of the you know, surveys, going out to different, you know, Hispanic communities, different parts of the community, you know, to like get them involved, engaged in the process, and you know, hearing back from them what's important, and then the policymakers being able to use that information to develop a strategic plan. I've read your strategic plan, looks great. Understand you're involved in redoing it, and you're waiting for the next city manager to be involved with that, and I appreciate that. I think that's a good move. I think the new city manager, whoever it is, hopefully me, but whoever it is, will want to engage in that process, and I would look forward to it.
Mayor, just one quick
Yeah.
follow-up on that, Eric. Have you been doing those internally with staff, or have you hired or retained outside consultants for strategic?
So, yeah, I would call them consultants, just well-known people. They may know something about the city, but they know how to facilitate. So, yeah, I think it's important to have somebody outside, not only because, you know, we need everybody's input, and if somebody's busy trying to run the process and do it, it kind of is a challenge. So, not to say it can't be done, but I'm just saying that's the approach that we use as far as, and they're fairly minimal. They're not a whole lot. It's just having somebody that knows how to facilitate conversations and get people to, you know, focus on objective priorities, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
I'm on 23. You had a lot of letters of people you forwarded or somebody sent to us about what a great guy you are and how wonderful you lead and all that stuff. But if you were to have, I have a lot of them so I can relate to this, if you had people that weren't as high on your leadership style as...
Yeah, and of course I wouldn't share that with you.
Absolutely, but now I'm going to ask you, what would they say is your weakness?
My weakness, you know, maybe I mean, I think it's more of a misunderstanding. Like I can get passionate sometimes, and I'm not afraid to like express that in a control. I mean, not in a demeaning way, but but some people can maybe perceive that as, not as something they didn't. But a lot of times it was because we disagreed on something, right? So when you're but at the same time, I've always tried to rail it back in and get to a point where, okay, we're communicating. Let's not communicate on emotion. Let's communicate on facts, a facts-based discussion. And yeah, so I don't know. Am I too passionate? Maybe. Yeah. Or yes. Okay.
So this kind of goes back to strategic planning a little bit. We like to look ahead and we like to think about the next 5 or 10 years in Sioux City, anticipating problems that we might have or what some of our challenges are, which become ever more present after every legislative session. So looking at the next 5 to 10 years in Sioux City, what do you think some of your top focuses would be, and what would you address that we would start on in terms of policy changes or changes that we could start implementing immediately to address some of those challenges?
Yeah, that's, again, that goes back to listening and hearing what really are they, and for me to come into it at this point and trying to identify this is exactly, specifically what, but I mean, I think the big priority would be how do we, how does the council function with staff? How do we, work together as a team? How do we, not to say that there's any issue, but it's just, making sure that we got, hey, I'm new, I would like to have that kind of team building process, exercise, so to speak, not strategic planning, but just, maybe getting more information about how we all act and, doing DISC, assessments, if you're familiar with how that works, and just seeing how people receive information is like a simple part of that, and how they, and in turn, how they communicate are important aspects. So what would I do? Yeah, and I would, I'd just do a lot of walking around and seeing things, with infrastructure, with, again, talking about the homeless situation, the, different, just look at what the record is saying, what are all the appeals we're getting coming from? Why is that, and, the city manager, I guess, deals with different appeals on dogs and other things, like what's going on there, and try to like use the experience that I've had to maybe get to a place where we're starting to address those. And I think what I value overall is that innovative type thinking. How can we think out of the box about how we can solve the problems that we are involved with? Again, supporting a innovation, and really supporting it, because those kind of ideas can come from anywhere within the organization, and just listening to those kind of ideas.
We're always looking for development,
Right.
labor, retail, growth, housing. How have you worked with developers or potential business leaders to overcome barriers of growth? And how would you build those relationships here?
Yeah, well, I think what you're really asking is how do you develop that private-public partnership relationship, and working, through the economic development groups that have been organized, engaging our economic, Marty, those types of folks, and I think that's happening already. And I think really, I used to do presentations in front of the chamber every year, an annual, status of the city, and that encapsulated a lot of people in the community that were business, small and large and in between, to kind of get an idea of what's been going on, what are the challenges that we have in terms of the city, and what things are going well. And it's just simple things like that, just being available to talk and communicate within the various folks that are in the development community. And, you know, I think, again, one of the big areas that we would hopefully focus on is workforce housing. Because one of the things that is important is that if we got the workers, we can try to make Sioux City the place to live, that emphasis on the ability to buy homes, for a family to buy homes. I get this from my kids all the time, you know, interest rates, all that kind of thing. How do we work with developers to make either affordable housing available or workforce housing available? Because once, you know, somebody makes that commitment to buy a house, to be in a community, you know, I think it floats all boats. And I understand there's some work being done to acquire properties and looking at options and opportunities, and it looks like you're trying to stay ahead of that. And I guess the biggest part of that is just working together in collaboration and identifying those folks that are out there that want to develop it, and you know, making it as easy as possible to try to accomplish that. I know there are always issues, but at the same time, I think going into a meeting with the idea that you're going to get to a yes, you know, I mean, there are always rules and regulations, I get it, but you also need to you know, provide a atmosphere that you're trying to get to yes.
Well, I want a big insurance company to come here and offer some white-collar jobs to our city.
Right,
And I want a Costco.
right, okay.
How will you help us get those?
Well, let me talk about Costco.
I know.
Did you hear my story that I got?
I read a little bit of it. Please share.
Okay, well, you know, it was a small community, smaller for a Costco, you know, city, but it had a big trade area. And so if you're familiar with how Costco works, they have a independent development group that works on providing Costco with recommendations on different locations. And ours hit the money, what they were looking for, but it also included a lot of annexation, infrastructure, all the things that we had to be ready to, and a property owner that had enough property that could facilitate not only the store itself, but other outlying lots for, you know, Subway or, you know, different offices. So it's, you know, working through that issue and you know, having a relationship with the guy, and you know, just picking up the phone, calling him, hey, how are we doing? You know, being proactive. I mean, I guess it was really, I mean, we got to the point where this guy knew that I was deploying, and when I got back, called me back and said, how you doing? Well, you're okay? And yeah, you know, it was that kind of relationship building, which it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. You know, we're not going to be cutting ribbons 3 months after I get here, right? But at the same time, we got to be working towards it. And I think it's important that, you know, you offer that kind of relatability. And so, yeah, so Costco is there, and I love Costco.
And I offered that on purpose, Costco, but I
Yeah.
want the employer. I really want the insurance industry, and I want some jobs like that to come to our community.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, I asked the question too, is like insurance, credit card companies, you know, what did South Dakota do to make that a part of their, that they can?
State banking laws back in 1980, so
Right.
their governor at the time made those changes.
Right. So there are things that, you know, those are kind of things that make areas attractive to those types of uses. And so sometimes it takes that kind of change at that level. And, but it doesn't mean we can't continue to, I think it's important that we continue to try to retain the current employees that we have, and how we also add to, not only retain, but add, you know, have that kind of relationship, that they're not going to somehow move to somewhere else, you know.
Well, we have a heavy base of that industry in Des Moines, in our central Iowa.
Right.
Just would like to drag them over here somehow.
Right.
So-
Well, I think, you know, one of the things we don't talk a lot about here, and I'll be attest to it, is the education system in this community is second to none. And so there's a lot of smart people coming out of here. And I think if there is ever a way to try to emphasize that or emulate that, that's, yeah.
So thinking about development, I I think equally as important is revitalization or rehab and existing properties, and we've managed to do quite a few of that throughout our downtown and bring life to some different properties. I wondered if you could describe any experience. Unlike the mayor, I haven't been out to your area out there in Oregon, and so I wondered if you could describe any experience you have with the planning and implementing some downtown revitalization efforts.
Sure. So let's go back to the fire.
Yeah.
Took out most of the downtown commercial buildings. We had a TIF district, or what you call a TIF district, we call it urban renewal.
Yeah.
And so we were working with developers, because this is a private public. It's not the city can't be developer in the developer business, but we can encourage with different incentives. And so they had an idea, and you can look it up. It's called Foodery, Phoodery. They're playing off of Phoenix Foodery. Anyway, it was a collaboration between some developers who went out and got they wanted to establish 5 kitchens, outdoor seating, 5 kitchens in the downtown, and they were all former food truck folks, and there was 30-some people that applied to be one of the 5 to be able to have a kitchen in the Foodery, and they selected those 5. It's a very eclectic menu. Like I said, you can look at it. It's a little spot where your kids can play while you're eating. There's a tap room. It's all being managed. They have different events, because I think people after COVID were looking for places to go be with other people. I say all that, that's our anchor now. Now we have an anchor in our downtown that we can build around. We've already seen some development from that, and it'll continue to happen, because that's where people want to be. And I think that's what we were able to accomplish there. How that fits here? I know you've done a lot of renovating of buildings, and a lot of folks want to rent or own the apartments or the buildings to live in, but they're not necessarily, the commercial on the front, on the first floor is not coming as quickly as we would want it, or you would want it. So developing some incentives and ways to get commercial in those buildings, I think would be important, and similar to what we did in Phoenix. And then in Medford, same thing. We brought some, there were existing companies within Medford down into the downtown areas. One of those, Mr. Mayor, one of those letters that was written that we were able to get, insurance company, a company that managed aftercare, memory care homes all up and down the West Coast. And then also the garbage company, the landfill company that managed the landfill in that area into one building. And it was built around a parking garage. So the offices, so they had basically not surface parking, but parking in a garage that the office was built, these offices were built into. And I think that was a really big win. It happened in the downtown. And now you see a lot of the workforce housing, different, that are working at those companies, staying there, so, yeah.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
So Eric, please share with us what strategies you would employ to ensure the municipal workforce mirrors the diversity in our community.
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier today. I think that's a big goal. I mean, that your workforce should reflect that you serve, and there's a lot of reasons for that. The most important one is, if you're talking about diversity, you're talking about different groups that are part of that. If they see a police officer that reflects their race, then that gives them the idea of, hey, maybe someday I can be that person. I think it's important that you try to, as you can, and try to capture their interests as early as high school, and understand, hey, there is a career here in wastewater. There is a career here in water. Are you a mechanically inclined person? I mean, all those kind of things that, you know, the school systems like, because they want to have people coming out that are, you know, able to get these kind of jobs. And, but I think it's important that we try to make that pitch to everybody. And so that the goal is that it reflects the organization. The same kind of racial statistics reflect the city.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have one that's not on here because I'm looking at your resume. I'm curious, most people don't leave a job and then go back to a job. So tell me why you did that.
Well, it's because they wanted me back, you know, I guess is the easiest way to describe it. I mean, that was a good thing, right? Yeah, I did some private sector work in between those positions, and went back to Iraq, a company that provided contractual services with Department of State. So I did that for a while and decided, you know, come back and yeah, they asked, did some work for the VA. I'm very passionate about veteran issues, and so they asked me back. So
Okay.
the rest is history. Yeah.
So sometimes we learn more from some of our failures than we do from our successes. So I'm curious, what is a failure that you've had throughout your career, and maybe some lessons that you've learned from that? And what's one of your greatest successes, something that you're proud of?
Professionally, personally?
Yep. Professionally.
Professionally, okay, yeah. It's like I can talk all day about my kids and my wife and all that stuff, but
Those are all the successes.
yeah, no, I don't. I'm sure you don't want to hear that, but you know, the biggest mess up, I guess, was, you know, probably in the first job that I had was going into there was pretty green, 25 years old, you know, running a city on the coast of Maine, kid from Iowa. You know, it was quite a cultural shock, not shock as much as, you know, different values and beliefs. And I guess, you know, going into that role thinking that I could just come in with my ideas and values and beliefs and not recognize that they come from a whole different aspect world. And and it was primarily a yacht building, fishing, lobster fishing community, and you know, and so, you know, after I acquired the ability to understand the language, because they have quite an interesting accent up there in down East Maine, you know, and it was a town meeting form of government. I learned early about collaboration and how you work with people and how you stand at town meeting. You stand up and you greet people on the way in. Those are all things that I went into thinking, why would that be so important? And then realized, yes, it is important, and I was told that it was important, and, you know, I adjusted accordingly. But I always related the folks that worked in that industry in Maine to the farmer. You know, they're very dependent on weather. They're very dependent on, like, natural resources. And, you know, growing up with a mom and, you know, farmer's daughter and my dad, I mean, it was easy for me to relate that and understand how to best communicate with folks that have those kinds of challenges. My greatest, boy, that's, you know, I think for me, the greatest is being able to mentor people that go on in the business we're in. And there's a guy a few times, you know, when I was a medical group commander, and we had the F-15s it was a schoolhouse, so it had a back seat, you know, fighter pilots, the instructors, and the students, and the flight docs, flight surgeons, which I was involved with. Got an opportunity to fly because that was important to this guy named Neil Menon. You can look him up. He told me he's working for NASA, and someday he wants to be an astronaut. And a few years ago, he got accepted into the astronaut group. So, I mean, you know, did I, he's a smart guy, he graduated from, medical school, I mean, all those things. But, yeah, did I have any kind of impact on that? I mean, maybe a little, but I'm sure, still feel like that was a person that, that I got to, and that's a cool thing about the military, you get to meet people like that. They're very focused and want to do great things. The other one was a person that he came in and he wanted to be a planner, and there wasn't real interest in hiring him, and I saw something in him, and I said, no, we got to hire that guy. He eventually became the community development director, and he eventually became the guy that did the Costco deal. I mean, he was the guy that made it all work. He was a planner. Now he's city administrator of Federal Way, Washington, 100,000 population. So I enjoy that. That's been things that I enjoy, getting people ready for the next level. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
During your career,
Yeah.
things are changing all the time. How have you remained abreast and up to date on practices and emerging trends in municipal government? How do you keep current? How do you keep in the know? How do you know what's your magic?
Oh, well, you're right, it is changing, and there's a lot going on. Some of the things I've already identified. And anyway, I guess the best way I've learned is I'm a part of an association, ICMA. I'm also part of a state association, OCCMA. I'm also part of a group of city managers that just get together in the county and talk about issues that are affecting the region. And that's where I keep abreast, and I learn from others. And a lot of times, in the public sector, it's interesting. It's cool. I like about the public sector is they're willing to share ideas, their successes and how they got there, and give you the entire A to Z, kind of how they made that happen. And it's kind of like a compliment. If you go ask them, like, well, how did you get your downtown commercial first floor? You're doing a good job. What kind of, those kind of things. So that's kind of the way I learn. I keep up going to conferences when I can, coming back and sharing what I learned at the conference, with the staff, so that they also know and are able to attend similar type conferences within their professions, finance directors, public works folks, the police, fire. They all have similar types of organizations that they keep themselves up to date. So it's important not only for me, but it's important for them to be supported in those efforts. So, yeah.
Eric, I know this can be kind of difficult situation to navigate, but I think it lends itself well to your experience and passion for mentorship.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could just share a situation maybe in the past in which you had a direct report who was consistently underperforming, and how did you address that situation, explain, and if you could explain your approach to kind of holding employees accountable for their job performance and behavior in the workplace, and maybe redirecting that.
Right. Well, first of all, you want to try to proactively deal with those kinds of situations, anticipate them, and sometimes the work performance can be for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's because of private issues, and that's why I believe a good work-life balance is important in the organization, and so that that there's a mechanism in place that we know if there are issues that are in the family that are affecting their performance at work, that we're aware of that. We support work-life balance. But in terms of just the overall how I supervise, I mean, I think it's important that you do hold people accountable. There's no doubt about that. I'm held accountable. You do the reviews, but more importantly, you just have that open conversation, and if you see things where they can improve, typically people are more interested in in doing that. In some situations, they may not be as willing, and those are the tough choices that you have to make as a leader. You know, because it's important that we all recognize that we're here to serve the public, and we gotta be doing what the best people possible, and it's important in so many different ways that I really emphasize just making sure that they are held accountable, but understand what the goal is. It's not a moving target, right? So you want to be fair, you want to be consistent, you want to be, you know, you want it to be a decision, you know, of working with them, you know, specifically on changing behavior or changing, you know, work kind of issues.
Sure.
But at the same time, you know, want to be consistent and fair about it. Yeah.
Okay, Eric, if you felt strongly that a majority or maybe all of the council was headed down a path that could prove detrimental to the city, how would you handle such a situation?
Well, I'd give them all the information that is fair and balanced and provides options and you know, the best that myself and staff can put together so that we all give you the best way to make decisions. But at the same time, if that doesn't work or that you decide to go another way, we, you know, support it just like it was a decision. The council, that's their prerogative to make the decisions. And if we think it's the wrong decision, you know, that's just how it, you know, in terms of the approach is that you support whatever decision the council makes from a policy perspective, but you give them all the information that you think is pertinent and maybe a way to go that minimizes or tries to address something that we see that could be catastrophic. You know, but fortunately, I haven't had a lot of that. You know, most of the votes have all been unanimous, and, you know, I think it's the work that we've done with you know, the mayor and the council and understanding that, you know, those kind of contentious ideas are never fun. So maybe try to get ahead of it a little bit. And, you know, work studies, I think, is a good way to kind of get information out there and have a conversation so we all know where we're coming from. These are all things, but the bottom line, that's your decision to make.
We've had, over the years, we've had a lot of 4-1 votes, 3-2 votes,
Yeah.
2-3, 1-4. I didn't know what it was
Notice
like
his
till
head
this year.
keeps going when
What-
it says 1-4.
What the one, I didn't know what it was like.
And they
this
have
year.
a right to be wrong, and that's okay. I still work with them, so.
Well, you know, Eric, the other side of that as well is you come to the council and mayor with a great idea and you present it to us and it falls flat. How do you know, that's the other side of it. How do you handle that? You say, well, okay, or would you fight for what you believe is something that would be good for the city of Sioux City? It's just kind of the opposite now.
Okay, so the question is, so you're basically asking what would be my approach to if they didn't like my idea, or, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, it's one man's opinion, right? And that's you know, you gotta hopefully make your point clear enough that where people see it and accept it. And if they don't, it's not the end of the world. You know, we just pick up and go with the next issue. You know, like anything. You know, we're kind of like family, right? We have our back and forth disagreements, but at the same time, we're here for a purpose, and we understand that that's the nature of this democracy. It's a messy democracy. It's not like it's prescribed. You know, that's why I love it. It's a democracy based upon competing values, competing ideas, and, you know, as long as we're doing it in a good spirit, then I think that's healthy. You know, tension, you know, disagreements is not always the bad thing. You know, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Our consultant gave us a list of things we can't and shouldn't ask, and I'm sure the HR department had some of us in mind when we got this list, but family is the most important thing for me, by far. I can quit my job tomorrow and be okay. So, and I know what it would be like if I went home and told Mrs. Scott we were gonna move 1,500 miles away from grandkids. I have no idea if you have any. I don't even know if you have a Mrs. Swanson. I'm not gonna ask that question because it's one I can't and I don't want to anyway. But obviously, it would be tough to uproot even at your age. So are you comfortable? Because family is a very important aspect of your job.
Sure, sure. No, totally. That's why I talked about work-life balance, the importance of that. And yeah, I mean, to me, it's kind of goes faith, family, job, friends. That's how I view the world. And we would have to come to a decision to make that move, just like we've done before, South Dakota, Oregon, that was a long haul. That was, Maine to North Carolina, South Dakota. I mean, those are all
Right.
long distance. The difference here is we don't have, our children are all out of the house, so I'm not affecting, like we did before, affecting kids. But they tell me now that, and I think it's true, that by making these kind of moves, they can cope with life a little easier, changes a little easier than probably the more, sedentary type individual, but which is, that's what they tell me. And,
Well, just so you know, if you get the job, golf and fishing are a lot higher than this job for me, so that.
well, I can appreciate that, sir. Yeah, I hear where you're
It
coming.
has to be a first-place trophy.
Yeah, we don't play for third like Dan. All right, go ahead, man.
So this is on that kind of work-life balance. How do you manage stress levels? As you know, this position can be incredibly stressful. You've got 5 people you have to maintain constant contact with, along with the entire staff. And at any minute, a water main can blow or something can always go wrong. Maintaining a healthy work-life balance is incredibly important. So how do you manage that stress?
Well, it goes back to, it may not look like it, but I try to maintain good physical fitness. That's important. Otherwise, and again, that was always pushed a lot in the military because to be able to mobilize and be in somewhere, the last thing you need to be is worried about your fitness, right? And so I don't know. I've kind of adopted that idea. Some days I'm better than others, and some days I'm better than others. Some years I'm better than others, but it's part of what I try to, it's a regimen, it's a habit. You just establish good habits and, understand that this job comes with a lot of criticism. And, so you have to take it in stride. You got to have a tough skin. If you don't, then I'm sorry, you're in the wrong business, and you also have to be 24/7, and showing up when the guys are out there in the rain trying to dig a hole, and you're not doing anything other than just being there and supporting them, and just like showing a presence that what they're doing is important. Those are all the things that I've done. The other day, my wife came running into the bathroom after I got out of the shower, and she said, "Eric, your phone's blowing up. Your phone's blowing up. You're getting a call from so-and-so." And so I had to, okay, what's going on? It was a 30-some acre grass fire, so on a Saturday night. And I was there working with the county and other jurisdictions on, getting the information out, getting all the apps that show, that you're, that there's, giving people evacuation notices, working that whole thing. Did I necessarily need to be there? Probably not. I didn't have to. I mean, there are times when I'm out of the town that I can't be to everything, but I think it's important that you have a good chain of command, and like for instance, if I am out, that there's somebody that can respond on behalf. And doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen. But I think it's important that you have that kind of somebody that can fill in that role. And who to call if I'm out. So, yeah.
You have touched on a little bit about your communication style with staff, being a team and working together and collaborating. Can you explain how you empower or would empower and inspire Sioux City's department heads and their directors? I think for me, I feel like we as a council could improve with our communication of our vision and kind of turn those directors loose to create that vision while checking back, with our city manager, et cetera, from time to time to make sure they're on the right track. How do you feel about that? What's your style?
Yeah, I mean, I may have said it earlier, but, thinking out of the box is important in establishing a atmosphere of, or a goal of having, inspiring, innovation is important. So no bad idea. Let's talk about it. Communication is important there, and I think also in terms of inspiring that type of behavior, you have to support it. You can't just say this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, but you actually got to put teeth behind it. You got to support those kinds of things as opposed to kind of poo-pooing an idea or not even creating an environment where that's possible. And that's going to be critical, as we work in the future as city governments is to be able to deal with some of the financial impacts. We got to find a better way to make the mousetrap, right? I mean, we're always searching for those kinds of opportunities. AI, I think, is something that's out there that's potential, has a huge potential. But in terms of the actual, department heads, how do you get that? I think they also have to provide that kind of a mechanism within their own organization. It has to come. It's not a top-down. It's a bottom-up process. And I think to get there, you have to really focus on supporting that idea. Yeah.
We're going to let Alex and Dan ask 2 more questions, and then let you ask us questions. Okay?
Sure.
Go ahead, Alex.
So one last question that I guess I would have, and I'm kind of molding a couple of these different points and things that you've brought up together into a question. I think that I've heard you state, that it's important for work-life balance, and I would share that. And then I also think, but sometimes these things become buzzwords or, just catchphrases, and whether you're talking work-life balance or mirroring your community and celebrating your diversity, I think you've touched on how that's important to you. And I just wonder if you have any examples of different programs, things you've implemented to maybe address or promote or encourage those types of things, because I think sometimes it's easy to say some of those things, but then you get into the weeds of, fairness and trying to be equitable across different areas. And do you have any strategies, anything you've seen in your previous experience that's enabled you to empower your workforce to not only celebrate the diversity, but also the maybe have some of that work-life balance? Because as you alluded to, I think sometimes that happens and that can really affect performance.
Well, I think there's a lot of ways you can measure that, and ways we all measure if it's working or not. You look at the statistics on absence and other things that are impacting the workplace. Some objective measurements, and just looking at it in general and from that perspective. But specifically, I think promoting it and encouraging. If there's some way you can involve, this is something else I learned in the military, is that they encourage family events, city family events, getting opportunities to go out. And so, I've been involved in Christmas parties that the spouse was invited, or, those kind of things. And what it does is it gives me an appreciation of not only the employee that we are impacting, with how we run the city, but there's a much larger group that's out there. It's the sons, the daughters, the fathers, mothers, whatever, So, those are the kind of things that I see as just simple ways to, show appreciation, have fun, Anything around food is fun, right? And
Yeah.
generally are attracted by that. So it's those kinds of things, and I think, we talked a little bit about how the media portrays, the city, and not allowing that to be the only message that the citizens get, that perhaps we create some of our own stories that reflect on some of the professionalism of not only some of the department heads, but some of the employees, because they're all folks that come bring professional degrees and certifications and, major responsibilities to the table. And I think recognizing that is important. A lot of, again, it's amazing. You give somebody a ribbon and giving them, finding ways to award, those kind of things. This Employee of the Year recognition that comes from not the top down, but from bottom up. People get to nominate somebody they feel like is doing great work, and they get a letter from me. We go out to lunch. Those kinds of just small gestures, I think, can go a long way in terms of I've kind of gone outside just work-life balance, but I think it's all the same kinds of things.
Yeah, I'm just celebrating those things. Yeah.
Eric, what can you tell us about our airport?
Need a new runway, I guess, is what I was. So I think I have some expertise in that area, I guess, or having, gone through, when I was in Klamath, they redid the runway there, and it was the city, obviously, because of the guard base. And so that relationship was between the city and the military, because they had certain needs and longer runways, and they're getting the F-35 mission. So, yeah, and we had to relocate all of our planes to Boise, Idaho from there, so it was a major planning effort for everyone involved. How did we coordinate some of our medical issues without the personnel necessarily there? And so, yeah. But in terms of the physical part of it, I think, can learn from the mistake that was made there. There was, after they put the runway in, after a long period of time, they started seeing cracks. There was a lawsuit that involved the city. It was, so it's something that has to be managed very well, and it's going to take some significant project management skills to make it all come off in a reasonable way. So that's what I know about the airport. Is if you talk about that, that's mostly what I learned. And but it's a great mission. I tell you, the 135, KC-135 is a great mission. The last time the refueling mission is significant. Part of that is provided by the Guard and Reserve. It's not active duty as much, it's the Guard and Reserve. And understanding that I think makes for a great future for the Guard. But we've got to keep working at it. Enjoy it. I mean, this, like, again, going back to Klamath Falls, they had like the small community that supported their Guard. You saw people, the mayor, city man, everybody, at any event that was going on, they were out there supporting it. And and I know they also have like a local group that meets and works on military Guard issues. It'd be great to be part of that. I spent a lot of time out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, just briefly.
Yes.
So, looking at your resume, I'm assuming that a lot of the cities you worked at previously did not have an in-house legal department, and
Right.
you're probably relying on outside counsel. Obviously, here we do have an in-house legal department, of which I'm a member. Would you be comfortable reaching out, in the case of, for example, you mentioned there was litigation arising out of the construction of the airport.
Yeah.
A lot of those either situations can be avoided or outcomes made a lot better by
Right.
proactively working with legal that are handily already on staff and, got to call and pay $350 an hour to somebody outside of there, or whatever the going rate is in Oregon. So would you be comfortable working with, in-house legal counsel in that manner?
Yeah, no, I think that's important. And, there are all sorts of legal issues that come before a city that are related to insurance, that we have insurance for, that they have their own legal folks that, they relate, so it's working. I mean, my expectation is our in-house would work with but in most cases, yeah, you don't want me to be reading that and saying, okay, I'd really prefer me reading it, but also getting the blessing of the attorney. That would be, it's almost like hiring an attorney, but not listening to what they have their advice. And I certainly do not suggest that. Yeah.
Okay, do you have some questions for us?
Well, I was going to flip that question back onto you guys as far as what does my first 90 days look like successfully? What's your take on that?
Well, I'll just jump in. We have a lot of community stakeholders. Just looking around right now, there are a lot of individuals that you're going to have to get to know, that you're going to have to formulate relationships with, and you're going to have to get feedback from. So my vision kind of for your first 90 days is really just developing those relationships with community members, not necessarily trying to jump into, what you might see or deficiencies, but more getting that community experience and getting other people's input and buy-in. Those relationships are ones that you're going to have to constantly preen. Having a good working relationship with the chamber, who's here, having a good working relationship with the NAACP, who is present as well, having a good working relationship with the media is always important as well. And we have a very vocal community here. And they can be your best advocates, or they can be critical if you're not present and you're not at the table having those conversations. So I would imagine that your first 90 days, presuming that you were to get the job and move your family happily here and get everything, closing offers on a house and everything taken care of, would be to work on developing those relationships and getting to know the community. I think that's the most important foot to put forward.
I would say, and I'm sure you have been made aware of this, we have, I believe, more than 20 departments within the city. Something that I did when I was elected, I didn't wait to be sworn in. I got clearance from the city attorney to start meeting with the department heads because I was not born and raised in Sioux City, so I wasn't acquainted with most of them. And that's something I would like to have you do, is to schedule an appointment with each one of the department heads, meet with them individually, kind of ask, what their challenges have been, what are they going to be going forward, what is their vision for their department, things like that. Get to know them a little bit one-on-one, and then perhaps have a meeting with them all together and sit down and have a collective meeting. I think it's really important to get information out of them, how they're feeling about things, how do they feel about their job, how do they feel about their staff. And I think that's a really good way to take a nice temperature check of the staff.
I don't know if we're going down the line and asking for what that looks like, but I wanted to hop in. And I would just say, I appreciated what you said earlier as far as active listening. You said you're an active listener, and that's the way you try to be a good leader. And I think that what my two counterparts before me have kind of touched on is the importance of establishing that trust. And so I would say that I think you can think of what both of those individuals have mentioned to you, whether it's outside stakeholders or internal department directors. I think that you can ask the mayor or anyone up here. I'm a pretty go and try to move fast and want to see change happen, and I'm okay with change, and I think we need to do what's best for our community. But I think especially when you're new in a role, acting out of haste can be detrimental and can erode trust faster than it can grow it. And so I think that's what I would look for in that 90 days is how are you establishing that trust and buy-in. I think anytime you're following a predecessor that was, in that position for a number of years, had established that, and how are you going to build upon that and ensure outside as well as internal stakeholders that you have their back and that you're excited for this challenge.
I think, Eric, I would agree with what's been said, to get out to as many people, as many groups as you can. And I would strongly urge you to interview with the newspaper, the TV stations, and the radio station, and because a lot of people tune in that way. And as we all know, it's easy to lose the trust of someone, but it takes a long time to build up that trust. And I don't have any doubt in my mind that you will build that up by listening to people. Oftentimes, I will try to listen to someone, and then I try to repeat what their issue is, just so I understand it. And then I also say, and this doesn't go over very well, but I also say, I'll work on it, but I can't promise you anything. The worst I could do is say, oh, I'll get that fixed for you right away, when I know I've got some other things I need to do to make something happen, and it may not happen for different reasons. The other thing I would hope is that you get the trust of the department directors, because from time to time, not very often, we're very fortunate, but from time to time, we've had conflicts with what was told to the business community or to other citizens in Sioux City, and they conflicted, because one director said one thing, the other said another, and then here we are sitting here as a council listening to kind of being in a jam. So I hope you can help control that and make sure you have a good line of communication, all of the department heads, and try to avoid that. I mean, mistakes are going to be made, and I make my share of them, but when I make them, I try to say, yeah, I made a mistake here, and then I try to remedy it. But I think you'll be good doing that. And the 90 days will go so fast, once you get started. But I'm here as a council member. I'm here to help you as much as I can when you do start.
Well, nothing against outside entities, because they're terribly important to the community, but I guess if you're asking me, your first 90 days ought to be getting to know the staff, because if that staff's not effective, you're not going to be effective with these outside groups that are important. So you're going to have to build that trust. I think that the last manager had that trust. I think the staff's willing to give that trust, but I just think it's going to take time, and you're going to need to get to know them personally, not only work-wise, just because you're going to be working with them every day. And I think it's terribly important that you make yourself known to the staff. And I don't mean just in this building, because the city's a whole heck of a lot bigger than this building. I think you need to I mean, I like what I heard when you said if somebody's out and got a water main break, if it's 30 below and I see that, I try to go to McDonald's and get them coffee. They probably don't want it, but at least it shows that you care about that person that's going that extra step. And I think that's important for the first 90 days. You'll have a long tenure here, and I'm not minimizing outside. I know that's going to be reported wrong, but it's just the staff and the inner workings of government. If you're not effective there, you're not going to be effective anywhere else, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion, and you've got 4 people that, have different opinions, so.
No, I see it as very consistent across the board in terms of what the expectations are, and I'm happy to use that information as I would transition. And you talked about house and family and stuff. I typically, go to the community and in kind of on my own, and this because there is so much to do, outside of work. Anyway, that's usually how it's kind of played out. No, I appreciate everybody, very consistent in their answers, response, the importance of staff, and having them, that the trust there is vitally important. Like you mentioned, it's not no one can do this work by themselves, and I appreciate everybody's responses that reflect that same philosophy, so.
How are we doing the citizen questions?
Are you ready to move on to that
Yeah.
segment? Great.
We've only got 20 minutes, so.
Well,
Do you have any
we'll try to give them.
questions, Eric?
No, I'm good, yeah, I'm fine, thank you, appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor, again, for everyone, my name is Mark Peterson. I'm the recruiting consultant with MGT. We've set aside this next segment for community Q&A, and members of the public were invited to submit questions in advance online, as well as if they enter this room. For those that are here, I don't think we've had any new questions submitted. Is that correct? Thank you. But we certainly have plenty that were submitted online. And Eric, I'm going to read those to you, if that's okay.
Sure.
And I'm just going to take these in kind of a random order. I'll skip those questions that were already asked of you by the council, because there are some questions that were almost identical for what the council asks. And I'm going to read them as they were prepared and submitted. So I'm not editing the content. So first question is, are you really interested in this job, or are you simply unhappy in your current position?
Well, there you go. Am I really happy? Yeah, I mean, I depending on what happens, I'm happy to go back to work for Phoenix, and there's nothing that would preclude that. But, there are opportunities come along that are once in a lifetime, and this is one that I see as once in a lifetime, and I want to give it a shot.
Thank you. This next question. In the cities that you have been employed, how and who managed weed control on city property, and were you successful in controlling weeds? I will also add there were several control-related questions.
So weed is important here.
It's an important
Topic. I understand that, because we're right in the middle of July, and the heat and the humidity.
Yep.
Just like every crack has got. So yeah, no, I don't know if it's been successful, but we've had a pretty our code enforcement process is on that, has a pretty robust program on that, and because sometimes when you let things like that go, other things get let go, and then next thing you got is a bigger problem than what you started with. So, but at the same time, how do you some of the things that we're trying to be proactive in that way is just knowing where the potential problems are, posting notices, trying to get people understand that what these are the rules, these are the regulations, and work from there. But it's a lot of chasing weeds for sure, and but that's part of what you want to keep your community looking like it's being well maintained.
Okay. Next question. Have you figured out a cure for homelessness? If not a cure, then what methods of dealing with it have you tried with some success?
I think with all the groups I met with today, that was a topic that was covered, or at least discussed in pretty great detail, and understanding the challenges, doing the right around, seeing some of the effects of the homeless situation. I arrived yesterday afternoon, got out of the car, and experienced my first homeless mental illness encounter. But that's not unlike other cities, and I think that's my approach would be, is to work with other communities, and the one thing that I think has helped in Medford is they created a special police, kind of a police and I wouldn't say social work, but somebody that's understands the mental health aspect of it, and and then having the enforcement part of it, because we're dealing with people that are either drug addicted or alcohol addicted or mental health. I mean, they're challenging situations, and so they have a focused patrol in a certain area where the homeless situation occurs, and they try to have a robust enforcement program. On the flip side, you know, we have to have compassion, and we have to hopefully find a way to get people out of their present circumstance. It's hard work. It's not easy work, but it's very hard work, especially with the kind of drugs that are being taken. It's not just a 28-day detox. It's sometimes a year, 2 years. But then there's graduated levels of homelessness, everything from people that are, you know, still on drugs that, you know, have, you know, a place to stay, and then, you know, on up to they're eventually able to go out and get a job and be, you know, a positive community. And yeah, so, but it takes a lot of focused work. It's very expensive, and you know, you use some of the existing. They use some of the existing buildings to retrofit for beds again to bring it into a single area, and then enforce it if they're not following the rules. If you followed the Supreme Court decision of Grants Pass versus it was a homeless group that I think actually decided a lot of it was in favor of cities being able to do the kind of things that I'm talking about. So use the law to actually help with establishing some ways to address that concern with compassion.
Okay, thank you. How would you balance economic development and still maintain the character of the city?
Well, first of all, I think you've done a great job with that, especially in the downtown and refurbishing some of the buildings and investing in the buildings and you know, maybe working on again that ground floor commercial piece. But it's taken some of the buildings I remember growing up and seeing, you know, as a young citizen of this community. So, but every place has its character in a city. You got a downtown vibe, you know, you got a commercial vibe, you got, you know, different restaurants, and I saw a pretty all-inclusive areas that seemed very appropriate for the development that was occurring there, and fit very well with the character of the area that they were in. So I think they're doing a great job.
What motivates you?
You know, it's like anything else. We all want to leave the place better than we got. You know, came into. So that's kind of very in a simplistic way how I approach it, and it's every day in the morning getting up excited about getting to work, and every day at night spent exhausted because you did put in a good sense of work. And those are values. Those are Iowa values. You know, it's what I grew up with.
Thank you. Next question, this is a little longer. Tax credits have been used to an excess in this city and state under the motto that you need to incentivize companies in order for them to come here. Do you have a proven way to ensure that the taxpayers get their money back for extending this form of corporate welfare?
Corporate welfare and tax credits. You know, talking about what the city does to incentivize certain projects and things can be viewed as welfare, except if you can put it under the lens of the number of jobs, you know, the tax base, having, you know, working with a known entity, you know, somebody that's in your town that wants to find a way to either expand or retain their business. I mean, I think you got to look at it from all aspects, and I certainly appreciate the fact in some circles it's looked welfare, in other circles it's sort of like an investment. I prefer, if it can be done right, to think of it as an investment.
Okay, we've had a few questions submitted from the audience, and this is one where I'm not sure you can answer, and I think it basically assumes that you are offered the job. It says, would you be willing to accept up to a 50% pay cut if that was put to a ballot initiative?
Well, I guess that's a unique question. So accept a 50% pay cut if it was voted on. Yeah. I guess if people said yes, I'd have to accept it, you know. Would I try to, I mean, I guess that's one of those I've never.
Yeah, that's fine.
The people have spoken, right?
Sure. We have an election coming up. How would you work with a future council that would like to eliminate the city manager department?
Well, you know, working with newly elected officials is something that I've had experience of just in the current position. Have a new mayor and 3 new councilors. So, I mean, there are engaging with them often and early and giving them an onboarding process, and perhaps in that process they can see the value.
Sioux City has a very diverse population. How would you, if you were to accept the position, how would you, let me see if I can read this, how would you assimilate this population into the community's culture? I'm not sure what that means, but you can take your best shot at it.
Well, you know, I've always found that this is a community that is very inviting and very friendly, and you know that's been my experience. And if anything, I would share that with people, prospective groups of people that want to locate here or stay here. I think you know a lot of that is you know, it's a testament of the strength of the schools, the churches, the things that are out there that make people feel like they're part of the community.
Okay. Can you share an example from your previous roles where you successfully partnered with a local school district to improve outcomes for youth and families?
Well, just go up the road to Yankton, about 60 miles from here, and we did a project when I was there that actually combined the high school with city theater, gyms, swimming pool, slide, and track, indoor track, all those amenities with a school, with the high school, which, you know, obviously those are a lot of things that the high school needed as part of their education, you know, swimming pools, theaters, a theater, tennis courts, soccer fields on the outside, you know, bought a fairly large parcel of property, had a trail with it. And I think it was probably seen as probably one of the most innovative things that certainly Yankton's ever done, or anybody has done, with working with a school district and a city to create, and it was voted on. And I think people will look back and see it as a huge success.
Okay, thank you. How would you, if you were selected as the next city manager for Sioux City, how would you improve transparency and public trust in city government?
Well, I think just be transparent. I mean, and what does that mean? You know, it's being able to provide the kind of information that people are looking for in terms of how decisions are made and how we evaluate those decisions and how we get public input on those decisions, that everybody's getting the same information that the leaders get.
Okay, how do you approach capital improvement planning in the context of limited resources?
Well, I think limited resources is, we never have an abundance of resources. There's always a bottom line, right? And so how do you get to prioritizing is important. How do you get to, getting the biggest bang for the buck? How do we, how do we deal with the inflation right now? How do, in going into these kind of projects that are extremely challenging because of costs that seem to keep escalating. But I think when you're in that type of situation, I think you try to design to a goal and not necessarily let the budget necessarily, so I guess what I'm saying, do it right. If you're going to do it right. And that's, I think, is important.
If selected for the position, how would you be visible in the community?
Well, for me, that's the most enjoyable part of the job, and so that's what I think goes back to asking you folks, like, who are some of the people that I need to talk to? Who are some of the groups? Where's the Rotary Club? I was a former Rotarian, so I know that they're always looking for speakers. So, it's those kind of things. But more importantly, get out in front of people that are, that maybe haven't been communicated with in a while, and try to identify where they would appreciate me being there and talking to them what I know about the city and what their interest is, gauging their interest.
How important is historic preservation to you?
Well, I think we're sitting in a beautiful example of that right here. That's the way this thing was put together, and I remember that when all those decisions were being made, I remember somehow I was engaged or understood that what was going on, and I think having a working historic building like this that's actively engaged, has an active purpose is cool. It reflects the history, and so yeah, I like it. I like what you've done.
Do you believe that community engagement is vital for a city to grow?
Well, what I think is vital for a city to grow is everybody understanding how decisions are being made, but at the same time, understand that they have to be made, and you go back to the financial situation. There's another way to try to work with that, and that's avoid retail leak. Try to promote ways to increase through development the amount of sales tax that you're collecting. You can't completely grow out of a problem, but it helps when you're growing.
You might have addressed this earlier, but I'll ask this question anyway. The Iowa legislature has done a lot of damage to home rule in cities in this state. Do you believe in home rule, or are you comfortable with abdicating their responsibility in picking your battles in order to win the war?
Well, I guess I've always been a home rule advocate, only because I think the best decisions are made locally. And anytime you got, whether it's federal or state rules that are being impinged upon, they get applied like over everybody, and they don't really make the kind of differentiations between the communities. And so being able to self-govern, if you want to call it that, at the lowest local level, I think is the most effective, especially in our business,
Okay, thank you. Would you rate these following traits in their order of importance? There's just four of them.
Okay.
Honesty, level of energy, integrity, and intelligence.
Yeah, I think you put them in order. Honesty. Is that the number
That
one?
order.
And honesty, what was the other three? I'm sorry. Intelligence was the fourth.
Honesty, energy,
Okay.
integrity, and intelligence.
Yeah, so I would say honesty and energy, or no, honesty and integrity are tied for first. They're like the same thing to me. Energy, obviously, that shows interest in, and intelligence. I don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. If I'm in that room, I'm in the wrong room, so I feel like that's something that is important to bring to this, is that you're always, you don't go into a room with all the solutions already that you're actually learning from people that might know more about what the topic is, so.
I think that's, the rest of them are kind of
Well, we're
a
at 3
mixed
o'clock.
crossover. I think that's
good.
Pardon me?
I'm
I think that's most of it.
3 o'clock, so we ended just when we said we should. Eric, let me say on behalf of our council, our staff, and our citizens, we appreciate you taking the time to come interview, and
Right.
we have a process to get through, as you know, and we will let you know. But
I'm looking
thank you.
forward to knowing, and thank you so much. You guys have been so great sharing, and the little basket I got last night in my hotel room, I was so happy to see a twing bing in there. I ate it.
Well, right down the street, they sell
Yeah,
them.
no, I got
no doubt.
Takes them all.
So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
I move we adjourn.
Second?
O'Kane,
Aye.
Shaner,
Aye.
Gott,
All right.
Waters,
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.